Well, it's story time. And before we get started, I want to, maybe you might, if you looked in a bookstore, you might have noticed some similarity of this slide to this book. And what I'm going to be telling you is I wished I knew this well enough to just read it, just tell it to you like a grandpa's story time, to the grandchildren. But I am going to have to read it, so bear with me. It's a little less handy when people just read things, but that's the way it is. I can't memorize all this. But I'm going to be going through basically this book. So if you want the whole book, the whole story, get this book. We're giving it at a discount right now for the seminar. But this is basically the pocket seminar for this topic and the other topic on the case study. So it's a complete story. And in this story, we're going to be talking about accountability groups. And there's another book that will cover that, and I would recommend that one too, that talks about how to do good accountability groups, which hopefully this story will illustrate for you. There is no outline for this. That's why you don't find anything in there in your book. But there's blank pages if you do want to take notes on page 18 and 19. And so I recommend getting Jacob's Journey. It kind of is, it's the whole seminar in a story form. It covers most of the things, maybe on a surface level, but it illustrates what does this look like? You're sitting here in these topics and you're taking notes and hearing a lot of good stuff, but what does it look like in real life? Now, this story is fictional. There's nobody named Jacob or Aaron in real life that had this problem and this story is taken from. But it is kind of true to life. The problem that is illustrated in this book and this story you're going to hear is a real life story taken from someone that I talked quite a bit with this last summer. So it's a real problem, but the story also is meant to be an illustrative story, but not a hard case. This is not a hard case. So you won't find lots of different meandering things and problems to deal with. It's simply to illustrate what it's done for the person, which is why we're here. And the story is of a young man named Jacob. He's basically in his 30s, single, and he struggles with something called, some people call it scrupulosity or religious sensitivity. That's kind of a technical name for it. A biblical term would be the fear of man and struggling with wrong views of himself and God. So how this plays out in his life is he overwhelming guilt and anxiety that he continues to have to fight. He has a compulsive behavior to do odd things. And he has a real strong religious convictions and standards for himself, not for others, but for himself, excessively, to a point of almost self-destruction. He has a fear of divine punishment. And it's not because he doesn't know the truth. He knows the truth, but yet not in a practical way. He knows it in his head, but he doesn't know in his heart. Practically, he sees God as pretty cruel. And he avoids people because of the fear of failing and that they might criticize him. And these things come to his mind all the time. So that's kind of describing Jacob. And so Jacob's journey is of trying to get free of this. But the story is really meant to illustrate how is he helped. We're not going to really get into the depth of scrupulosity and all that stuff, but you got to have something to deal with in order to illustrate how to deal with it. So what I really hope to illustrate in this is basically the things you're going to hear about in this seminar. Having good objectives, we heard that. Starting a meeting well. Having good meetings. Asking good questions. Interpreting answers well. Charting a course. Productive homework. Looking for heart change. And then finishing well. So this is a complete cycle. It will start and finish in this story. So this topic is split into two topics. We're going to do first part of the story here, and then we'll finish the story in the next topic tomorrow. So let's begin. And each of these is tiny little chapters with a title and a slide. And the slide is hopefully will just kind of give you kind of a cartoonish thing, but it's a way to illustrate kind of what's being said in the chapter. Jacob is a young man, single, in his 30s. He spends his days working in a reputable business. His quiet, competent demeanor earns him respect at work. But beneath this exterior lies a hidden struggle. Jacob constantly battles self-doubt, privately questioning his worth and his contributions. When he's alone, these doubts intensify. He dwells on his flaws and unnamed sins, seeking forgiveness through silent prayers. At church, Jacob feels disconnected. He often compares his faith to others, wondering if he measures up. His polite interactions mask a deeper battle with his spiritual identity and his self-worth. Jacob spends a lot of his evenings replaying his days, replaying fears of inadequacy and unmet divine expectations. Note, divine expectations, not his co-workers' expectations, but what is God expecting? It works on him. So he has, this is shadows of doubt. So in his living room one evening, Jacob just continues this process, confronts his inner turmoil. The once comforting space magnifies his restless thoughts. He paces, he burdened by his doubts of his own worth and purpose. He asks himself, am I just a disappointment? And I think that's to God. Is he just a disappointment to God? And he often questions this. Jacob is haunted by relentless questions about his adequacy and potential failures. Potential failures. So he borrows from tomorrow. So he engages in compulsive behaviors like meticulously arranging books and furniture, seeking control of those things for relief. A deep fear of divine displeasure haunts him for every perceived misstep. Does every mistake distance me from God, he thinks. His anxiety grows when he does that. His fear taints his perception of himself and the world, feeling like he's a constant burden to everyone. Increasingly, Jacob finds himself withdrawing because those demands become overwhelming. He fears exposing his vulnerabilities, thinking they wouldn't understand, which leads him further into isolation. Intrusive thoughts, often about past failures, disrupt his peace, intensifying his feelings of unworthiness. So intrusive thoughts, these are thoughts that he didn't ask for. They just hammer in. And he doesn't know what to do about it. So he's overwhelmed by doubt and anxiety. And he turns to, in a moment of desperation, he decides he's just got to find some help. So he takes a step toward help. He arranges a meeting with Pastor Felix in the office at church. Despite his pressing need, he is filled with apprehension. Jacob feels the weight of his own struggles. He braces himself to reveal his inner chaos to Felix. Felix's questions, gentle yet probing, invite Jacob to express his feelings. Jacob describes his experience as a relentless storm of guilt and fear, feeling perpetually inadequate in God's eyes. He traces the doubts of his father's, he traces the growth of these doubts to his father's passing, revealing a lifelong struggle with meeting his father's expectations and fearing divine judgment. He connects He connects not pleasing his dad with not pleasing God. Felix continues to explore the roots of Jacob's turmoil, focusing on his relationship with his parents. Jacob admits to always striving for his father's approval and now feels haunted by the need to prove his worth to both his father and God. He expresses fear that God views him as a failure, reinforcing his feelings of constant judgment. Jacob's responses reveal a complex dynamic with his parents, particularly with his father's unreasonable expectations. Felix, with empathy and insight, guides Jacob through this. They finish the meeting with a comforting prayer, and Felix instills a glimmer of hope in Jacob. Leaving the office, Jacob wrestles with mixed emotions of apprehension and emerging hope. So they really didn't get anywhere. Felix just wanted to find out what. Jacob came and asked for help. Felix tries to get an idea. What is he wrestling with? What to do for Jacob? The church's ministry team, including Sam the deacon, Matthew and Frank, both ministers, meet to discuss Jacob. The atmosphere is one of quietness, as Felix, with a tone of concern, outlines Jacob's situation, particularly his struggles and sensitive nature. The team discusses the situation thoughtfully, weighing various options for Jacob's support. Each suggestion they thought of, including counseling referrals, reading materials, is carefully considered. It becomes apparent that Jacob, due to his sensitivity, requires a personalized approach. The group discusses integrating Jacob into an accountability group. The team has witnessed the positive impact of these groups on their members, particularly following their discipleship training. They believe that such an environment would offer Jacob the tailored guidance, belonging, and support he needs. The ministers deliberate on the specifics, focusing on finding the right group and leader to ensure Jacob's comfort and understanding. The meeting concludes with a prayer for wisdom and guidance in their efforts to support Jacob. In leaving the meeting, each minister feels a renewed commitment to help Jacob, carrying a part of his burden and prepare to offer support. A helping hand. A few days later, Jacob meets with Felix again, feeling a bit apprehensive about the conversation ahead. Felix greets him warmly, acknowledging Jacob's courage. They begin with a prayer. Felix speaks about the various options the ministry team discussed for Jacob. As Felix explains each suggestion, Jacob listens intently, and his emotions are a whirlwind of hope and anxiety. He contemplates each option, wondering how it could help. And then Felix presents the idea of joining an accountability group as the ministry team's recommendation for him. Jacob initially feels dread at the thought of sharing his struggles with a group. He also remembers his lack of interest in the church's recent efforts to revitalize these groups and provide discipleship training. However, as Felix details the vision, the principles, and the positive impacts of those groups, Jacob's tension eases slightly, and he sees potential benefits. Felix assures Jacob that the groups are not merely for fellowship, but also for mutual support and growth with members who are sensitive, committed, and well-trained. This information offers Jacob a glimmer of hope, helping him consider that participating in such group has some potential. Felix also mentions the option to have further discussions with the ministry team if the options presented are not workable for him. So encouraged to take his time deciding, Jacob leaves with a mix of emotions, but a newfound sense of hope about the possibilities ahead. And the decision. At home, Jacob wrestles with the decision about joining the accountability group. As he moves through this evening routine, thoughts of the meeting with Felix replay in his mind, stirring a mix of doubt and hope. Jacob grapples with the idea of sharing his deepest struggles with a group, feeling apprehensive about the vulnerability it brings him. He questions whether they will understand and accept him beyond the facade he's maintained for so long. But a flicker of hope emerges at the thought of not facing his burdens alone. And finally, he decides to take a step forward and give it a try. He sends a message to Felix, accepting the offer to meet with the accountability group. This decision, though full of uncertainty, is a turning point for him. Because he's been wrestling with this by himself for years. And Felix's prompt reply offers encouragement. He arranges a meeting with Oscar, the group leader. And this response gives him a sense of relief. With this decision, the night transforms from one of doubt and apprehension to hope. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions now. We've kind of introduced the problem, kind of got an idea of what he did. He got desperate. He went to the pastor. The pastor meets with the ministry team. They discuss some possible options, present him with one, and then he makes his decision to give it a try. So in the scene where Jacob discusses his concerns with Felix, the pastor, let me ask you, and you can answer if you want to, what counseling skill is Felix using when he asks Jacob various questions about his experiences and feelings? Any guess? It's not really a trick question, but I realize it really hasn't been covered yet. So, but you can take a shot at it if you want to. Gathering data, yeah? He's getting to know him. So here's one answer. A second answer. Bill's was pretty good. Felix is using active listening and asking open-ended questions to encourage Jacob to show his care for Jacob. I'm sorry, that's not written right. To show his care for Jacob, encouraging him to elaborate on his experiences. Very simple. He's just basically getting to know him. It's kind of like what Ben mentioned about asking some broad questions to kind of get to know generally what the problem is. Now, I acknowledge that this is moving fast, probably faster than real life, but in order for we to get done without 6 topics on this book, we have to go fast. Another question is, reflect on a scene where the ministry team decides to introduce Jacob to an accountability group. What does this decision suggest about how this ministry team views their role in the care of the church? A little more touchy, a little more tricky. It's not meant to be a trick question, but it's kind of deep. So what does it suggest about how they understand their role of caring for the church? The fact that they suggested an accountability group.
It's a team effort.
Okay? It's a team effort, exactly. Any other stabs at it?
They don't have to do it all then.
Okay? Yes.
Spread responsibility.
Amen. Well, we've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to move on and give you a couple answers here. Besides those were good, and I think they're along the line of what I've got here. Number one is they understand their role as one of being responsible to equip the members of the church for work of ministry, as Paul speaks of in Ephesians 4:12. That's where he said their responsibility, those who are given as gifts to the church, the leaders, is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church. They also understand their own limitations as men in leadership, as you mentioned. They see their position as a role as not including being the church counselors. They see value in delegating responsibility and authority to others to handle the needs within the church. And this is where Acts 6 is kind of relevant. And that's where the 12 called a meeting and they appointed some men to take care of the needs of the widows. So they saw they had their role, but their role wasn't to take care of some of these other things going on. So that's a precedent for this. And they understood that they're not the only ones given spiritual gifts, but they're given to all believers. So these gifts are a resource that God's given to utilize to build the body. Let's go on to the next part, seeking light. Connecting paths. Bishop Felix initiates the next step for Jacob by contacting Oscar, the leader of the church accountability group. This gives me the impression that there's multiple accountability groups, but they picked one that seemed appropriate for Jacob's needs to plant him into. So Oscar, known for his wisdom and empathy, is briefed on Jacob's challenges. They end their call committed to helping Jacob. And Jacob, still grappling with the emotions of his meeting with Felix, receives a call from Oscar. Oscar describes the accountability group as a supportive environment consisting of 3 other men where Jacob can share and find strength. Jacob agrees to meet Oscar and attend an upcoming group meeting. So Jacob's decision to join the group is marked with a mix of resolution and apprehension. He reflects on the significance of this step, contemplating the potential of finding understanding and support. And despite the unknowns, Jacob recognizes this as a necessary step of moving forward. And he hopes that it will be a place where he can openly share his struggles. First encounters. So Jacob, with a mix of feelings of apprehension and hope, arrives at the church for his first accountability group meeting led by Oscar. Entering the modest meeting room, he is greeted warmly by Oscar and introduced to the 3 other group members. Aaron, with a gentle demeanor, Luke, friendly and easygoing, and Ethan, quietly strong and attentive. The meeting begins with casual conversation, allowing Jacob to ease into the group. The members share personal stories and experiences, helping to calm Jacob's nerves. And Jacob, initially hesitant, gradually opens up, encouraged by the group's genuine interest and warmth. Now, this group is more than just a fellowship group. It displays focus and initiative. Shaped by training and commitment to the group's vision. Thoughtful questions and attentive listening create a safe space for everyone in the group. Jacob senses a difference in this group's sincerity and purpose. It's not what he expected from an accountability group. The meeting leaves him feeling encouraged, with other members showing a keen interest in supporting him. And he leaves with appreciation for their sincerity and commitment to helping one another. Reflections in solitude. After attending his first accountability group meeting, Jacob, alone at home, reflects on the experience. He remembers the interactions, the shared stories, and the emotions they evoked. Jacob fought with questions about whether the group could truly understand the depth of his guilt and fear. Because to him, this was far deeper than anything else anybody was experiencing. So to him, he just couldn't figure out how anybody else could understand this. Because in his eyes, everybody else was normal. The faces of Oscar, Aaron, Luke, and Ethan came to mind, each with their own story, offering Jacob a sense of calm amidst his apprehensions. Despite this, Jacob harbored doubts about sharing his deepest struggles with the group, fearing his burdens might be overwhelming for them. As he continues to think about the meeting, Jacob notices a subtle change in himself. The acceptance and understanding shown by the group members were beginning to break down the walls he had built around his heart. Their openness and sincerity had made a positive impression on him, and Jacob is caught in a tangle of hope and uncertainty. He acknowledges the potential for growth and healing within the group, but he remains apprehensive about fully opening up to them. A focused approach. So, back to the accountability group. In the next meeting, Jacob displays a slight change in demeanor as he joins the circle of chairs. This time it's Jacob's turn to share more of his personal story with the group. Jacob speaks hesitantly about his deep-rooted struggles with guilt, fear of failure, and a sense of unworthiness. He describes his life as a constant battle with fear of divine judgment, a fear that originates from his efforts to meet his father's high expectations and continues to plague him in his adult life. His confession, filled with raw honesty, depicts his inner turmoil and the exhaustive measure he takes to cope, such as obsessively maintaining order and avoiding situations that might lead to failure. So if you think about this, he didn't get it all out, but he poured out some very sensitive things. Now you can imagine what would happen. Well, I won't go there. Let's say it this way. If the group doesn't handle that well, how they respond to him and what he told them makes all the difference as to what his experience is going to be with that group. Can you catch that? So it's going to be really important on how they handle it. Now, this is a quick story, so we're in just a couple words. It says, that they're with compassion and they understand him and understanding. That's really good. That speaks a lot to them, to him. So it says here, the group listens empathetically, with empathy, with like putting themselves in his shoes. Where's it going for him? So Jacob's sensitivity leads to a realization by those in the group that his situation might benefit more from a personalized one-on-one support. They discuss this with Jacob. They suggest to him that he may benefit by meeting with just one of the brothers in the group. And they suggest that he meet individually with Aaron for more focused counseling. This suggestion didn't take long for Jacob to accept. He was seeing qualities in Aaron that he liked and thought that he would like to talk with him about some of the things he's facing. He liked the men in the group and very much wanted to be a part of it, but he realized that it would be less stressful to work with an individual in dealing with these struggles. So the meeting concludes with an agreement to support the new approach. Jacob leaves the meeting with a sense of cautious optimism. He's always cautious. He's always carefully stepping forward. Why? Because this is new to him. He's battled this inside for so long, and to step out, it's just not going to be real happy. He's got to be careful because he already feels unrealistically the condemnation of God. So why would he think any different about people? So in a sense, he's pretty brave to step out and try this. So he leads with cautious optimism. He felt comforted by the group's commitment and the prospect of working with Aaron. So we come to some more questions. We finished this. Jacob is now kind of plugged into the group, been a few times, and they suggest meeting with Aaron individually. So he gets a start, and then another change of direction a little bit. But so far, Jacob still has got courage. So let me ask you, how does Jacob's reaction to the idea of joining the accountability group illustrate common challenges faced by individuals seeking help? Let me read it again. How does Jacob's reaction to the idea of joining an accountability group? Remember, he reacted. How did he react? He was apprehensive. He was, I don't know how this is going to work. How can I share? He had a hard time sharing with the pastor. How was he going to share that with the three other guys? So what does that illustrate about the challenges faced by individuals wanting help? They face challenges. When people want help, they face a challenge to ask. So what would you say? What does that say about that? Especially, maybe I would say, from the viewpoint of someone wanting to help. It would help us understand that this is not easy. we think, we sitting here, when I answer phones and we think, well, people come to us. Well, what did it take for them to come to the point to ask, to call Deeper Life? Wow, that's big. It's not trivial to ask for help. So Jacob's initial hesitation about joining the accountability group reflects common fears and vulnerabilities individuals often experience when seeking help. And it highlights the challenges of overcoming social anxiety, fear of judgment, and the difficulty in opening up about personal struggles. So often, when I talk about this with people and we talk about the difference between people asking for help at a counseling center versus asking for help in their home church, often people say that, oh, it's easier to ask a stranger than it is to talk to somebody that I know and that knows me. So that's another topic, but we need to understand that it's there and that it's real. It's something that is another thing on top that they have to deal with. So what does the decision to pair Jacob with Aaron for one-on-one meetings signify about the group's approach to individual needs? What does that say about that group and how they think?
They respect it.
Okay. They respect the individual. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Would it also perhaps reflect that it would reflect the training that they've had? That, it's I did a little bit of research on accountability groups, and my own experience is that often the thought about what an accountability group is, it's a place you go where everybody can commiserate with their problems and say, well, what did you do this week? Or how did you fail this week? And then they all pat each other on the back. Oh yeah, that's tough. It's tough. Or even worse is they're out there with the notebook saying, okay, did you do this last week, or did you do this last week? And so increasingly they become detectives, trying to find the flaw or the misstep that the person who wants help with. And that's what the person wanting help expects. They expect, I'm hiring a better detective to catch me when I do wrong. Well, that's a total distortion of what an accountability group should be. And so here's an example of another approach. It's thinking it through. Well, can we help this or not? No, maybe it would be better if we did it this way. Now, what that does is implies that there may be some things that it would work just in the accountability group. And there are things that accountability groups can do to help people go forward with problems. So that's what that's implying. Let's move on. Walking through shadows. So now Aaron and Jacob are paired up, and now they're meeting. They're going to be meeting together, and we're going to hear about some of those meetings. Building trust. In their first one-on-one meeting, Jacob and Aaron convene in a quiet corner of the church. Jacob, familiar with Aaron from the accountability group, feels a sense of relief and sees this as a positive step forward. Aaron, with his calm and understanding demeanor, has already made a reassuring impression on Jacob. Aaron begins with a gentle approach. He works to understand Jacob as a person. Tell me about yourself, Jacob, Aaron asks. Jacob, initially hesitant, gradually shares aspects of his life, including his work, his hobbies, some of his deeper issues. He talks about his paralyzing fear and the nights consumed by dread of divine judgment. He struggles to articulate this sense of falling short in God's eyes. Aaron listens intently, and encouraging Jacob to continue. He very briefly mentions the concept of Christ-centered hope and the role of grace and redemption in their faith, but he urges Jacob to continue. He's careful not to push back on Jacob with very much biblical answers and advice at this point. He also refrains from giving much of his own story because he knows that can give an impression of wanting to talk about himself rather than listen to Jacob. So the meeting ends with a discussion about a counseling plan tailored to Jacob's needs. This journey of yours is yours, and I'm here to walk it with you, Aaron reassures Jacob. They finish with prayer, leaving Jacob with a growing trust in Aaron. This step marks the beginning of a deeper exploration into Jacob's challenges. So he acknowledges Aaron acknowledges to Jacob that, Jacob, this is your journey, but I'm going to walk with you. He's not leaving him hang. He's not giving him advice and saying, go do this. He's just reassuring him. He's listened to him. He's reassuring him, I'm going to walk with you, and let's plan the next meeting. Discovering the depths. Jacob and Aaron's next meeting takes place at a local cafe, a setting chosen by Aaron for its relaxed atmosphere. Jacob, feeling a mix of emotions in this public space, grapples with a new level of vulnerability away from the church's familiar environment. So now, Aaron initiated this, thinking it's a relaxed atmosphere, and it is. You know, there's, as we can see from the picture, there's not many people there. So, but as with all humans, it's now this introduces another little thing that Jacob's got to deal with. Now it's not just the accountability group and Aaron. Now it's I'm sitting in public. What if they hear me? But he deals with it. He goes on with it. He works with it. The conversation begins casually, but soon goes deeper. Aaron gently asks Jacob about his times he's felt overwhelmed recently. Jacob recounts a work incident, a minor mistake that leads to intense self-criticism and anxiety. His thoughts during these moments are harsh self-judgments and a relentless inner critique. Aaron's gentle probing questions help Jacob reflect on how these feelings show up in various aspects of his daily life. Jacob shares various aspects of his life, and that his anxiety isn't confined to work. It's like a pervasive shadow, a constant fear of judgment from others and God. The cafe setting recedes into the background as their conversation deepens. Aaron's questions open areas of Jacob's thinking, guiding him through unexplored emotional terrain. Sharing his struggles brings an unexpected sense of relief to Jacob. That's new. I mean, he was apprehensive. He was afraid of people hearing him, but as he does it, he senses, this feels good. This is helping. Aaron then gives Jacob some homework to do, to record the time, date, and circumstances of instances when he feels overwhelmed, aiming to better understand this anxiety. As the meeting concludes, Jacob feels a sense of progress and cautious optimism. Again, cautious optimism. But the homework is important. He didn't just finish and say, well, I'll see you next time, but gives him an assignment. And this is often the heart of good homework. We'll hear more of that. But is be specific. Ask specific things and record specific times, and just depending on what you're dealing with. But being specific is a lot more useful than just being general. Patterns of the past. Next meeting. In a modest room within the church, Aaron and Jacob get together for more interaction. The focus this time is on Jacob's recent homework, a record of instances where he felt overwhelmed. Aaron carefully reviews Jacob's notes, recognizing patterns in these emotional episodes. So we already see something here. Jacob did his homework, and he had something written down, and Aaron could look at it. So that's good. Jacob was serious about this help. He's not afraid to say he's nervous, he's apprehensive, he wonders, but he's doing what it takes. Jacob shared his thoughts, often undercut by his own doubts about their seriousness. Aaron's probing questions encouraged Jacob to explore the thought process behind his reactions, revealing his habitual self-criticism and his constant search for approval. Jacob admits to often distracting himself or seeking forgiveness for unclear transgressions, which highlight his ongoing battle with self-judgment. That's a key thing about oversensitivity. The key word is unclear transgressions. God is never unclear with us when we do something. I think it's specific. It's not general. So that's a clue that it could be internal. Aaron acknowledges Jacob's courage in sharing these difficult things. That's important. He encourages him by saying, you've got courage to sit here and tell me this stuff. He then introduces the next step, exploring some of the possible origins of his struggles, particularly Jacob's childhood experiences with his father. He assigns Jacob to reflect and document specific childhood memories. So leaving the meeting, Jacob again has mixed feelings. Despite fears of discussing some painful history, he has confidence in Aaron's methods. And with Aaron's guidance, Jacob feels prepared to delve into these memories, understanding their influence on his present struggles. So, unearthing memories. We get to the nitty-gritty. In their next meeting, Aaron and Jacob focus on Jacob's childhood memories, specifically those involving his father. Aaron delicately prompts Jacob to share specific memories that he's written in his journal. Jacob recounts instances from his childhood marked by his father's high expectations. These memories highlight a young boy's struggle with anxiety and inadequacy, feelings that persist into his adulthood. Jacob vividly describes the pressure of constantly striving to please his father, a pursuit that leaves him feeling perpetually inadequate. He shares with Aaron how he feels like he's always walking on eggshells around his father, like he was, always trying to avoid mistakes and disapproval. This relentless quest for perfection stems from a deep-seated fear of losing his father's love and approval. But I might point out here, a counselor paying attention might pick up that did Jacob ever really have his father's love and approval? Was he ever going to get it? No, we're not going there, but that's an illustration of the way you can pick up on a person's story and ask some questions internally. He might not have asked that personally to Jacob. Jacob recalls these experiences with a sense of nostalgia and discomfort, but not fully realizing how they shape his current self-perception. By the end of the meeting, Jacob gains insight into how these experiences may have influenced his present situation. So, now there's a task. What do you do with that information? Aaron knows this now, and Jacob talks more about it, maybe more than he has ever. So now we do some connecting. You got to connect the dots in a way. So in this meeting, connecting past and present, Aaron and Jacob explore how Jacob's childhood experiences, especially those with his father, affect his current life. Aaron's approach is as much about listening as about guiding. How do you think these early experiences are influencing your current thoughts and actions? He inquires. And in what ways do you see similar patterns emerging in your adult life? So Jacob pauses, his gaze drifting toward the window, lost in thought. It's like I'm always on edge, Aaron, he confesses, his voice barely above a whisper. Every time I make even the smallest mistake, I can't shake off the feeling that I've let everybody down. It's as if I am back in my childhood, trying desperately to earn my father's approval. And this fear, it doesn't just vanish when I leave work, it follows me, casting a shadow over my friendships, my time at church, even my quiet moments alone. It's like I'm carrying this constant burden of proving myself, and it's exhausting. Jacob looks back at Aaron, his eyes seeking understanding. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be able to break free from this cycle, to just be at peace with who I am, without this relentless pressure to be perfect. Aaron assures Jacob that he can see progress already, but they have a lot of work to do ahead. And to pursue that more, he assigns Jacob a new exercise, journaling instances where his past affects his current behavior, focusing on his feelings and his reactions. Aaron explains that while the past is informative, it doesn't dictate Jacob's future. Understanding these connections will help them work toward breaking the cycle. So let's talk about this piece some more. They've had a few meetings. They started to get to know one another, and Aaron started learning about the connection with Jacob's feelings of inadequacy and condemnation, with the influence of his father in his childhood, that he could never do it well enough. And his father demonstrated that clearly, it seems, from the story. So, what biblical counseling principles did Aaron use in counseling Jacob? Okay, I'll answer them for you. This is why I would have liked a case study to be like the last topic, but I would have, never mind. Being the last topic is a hard one, and people are, by that time you've heard so much and you're about so full of, it's hard to get any more. So anyway, bear with this. Homework assignments is a biblical counseling practice that Aaron used. The point is to help propel counseling between meetings, not just depend on what they can get done in an hour or whatever they're doing. Because you can imagine there's a lot of things that Jacob can write in a week's time, we don't know what their periodicity of their meetings are, but it gives them time to think and write this down, ponder it, and then come back with it, and then they can discuss it. Use of prayer, providing a safe environment, and promoting understanding of God's character and grace. Now, I'm being a little quick about this. We've got to move on. And you'll learn more. Basically, that's what this whole seminar is about. Some of these biblical counseling practices that, and Aaron used them, I just didn't cover them right now. So let's move on. This is the third part of Jacob's journey, but we're only going to get partway through because we're about running out of time. So we'll get launched into that, and then on the next topic, we'll pick it up from there. And this, actually, I'm wrong. We already went into the third one. That went faster than I thought. So, okay, I thought there was more, but this is a good time to quit. But hopefully it leaves you ready to pick up on the next one to continue the story. We've got more to go, and the best parts are to come yet. So hope to see you in topic 9. Thanks for paying attention. I didn't see anybody fall asleep. You're doing well, and thank you.